Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Iblis Manifestations Podcast. This channel features lengthy off-limits conversations with various different artists and entrepreneurs, predominantly from the underground metal scene. We take deep dives into the topics of life, music, spirituality, and take insight from a variety of thought-provoking perspectives from personalities who you don't often hear from in a mainstream settings. I am your host, Cheyenne, and I was originally born and raised in Iran and currently reside in the UK. I am the frontman and founding member of the black death metal band Triptykon, who have been active since 2009. The band originally started in the Islamic Republic of Iran, where such type of music is banned as well as a punishable offense. You can check the band's pages for any updates on tour dates as well as new music. I am also a personal trainer and an online fitness coach who specializes in people achieving the best versions of themselves physically and mentally. Having been someone who was once extremely out of shape and overweight, I find it to be my duty to be able to pass on the information and knowledge which I've gained to help others achieve the same transformation. The Iblis Manifestations Podcast also features a variety of solo episodes where I discuss personal experiences and anecdotes in a very candid fashion, covering everything from mental health, spirituality, philosophy, and even paranormal experiences. This is the Iblis Manifestations Podcast. To support it, be sure to subscribe to the channel and visit the link in the descriptions.
It's great talking to you, Cheyenne, really. And best of luck to your endeavors for this podcast. I think it's a great initiative.
You're my favorite person to talk to for interviews and stuff. So I love what you're espousing out here. I love the knowledge and the perspectives that you're curating through this, and I'm just so honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
As I told you, it was one of the most interesting interviews I've ever had, because we talk a lot more things than just music, and I really appreciated that.
I respect you deeply, and it's an honor to be here.
And friends, remember as always, better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. Enjoy the podcast.
When I was about 13 or 14, me and my best friend made scary faces out of clay.
Oh yeah.
And then put paper over it and wetted the paper with glue.
Right.
And when it was dry, we painted these paper faces. They were only like that size, and made them like little horror faces. And I always kept that in the back of my mind and thought, one day I'm going to do that again.
Yeah.
And I was always fascinated by death masks. Whenever I saw a death mask in a book, it always fascinated me. So eventually I was like, if I'm dead, I can't see my death mask. So let's do my death mask while I'm still alive. So in 2007, at the end of Celtic Frost's second US leg of the last Celtic Frost tour, Giger's agent in America arranged for me to have my face cast made,
Right.
At the premises of Fangoria magazine.
Okay.
By some people who do face casts for Hollywood movies. When they needed like a dead body in a movie, they kill the actor's face cast. So they made that for me, and then they started experimenting with it. And as I said, it was just for me personally at the time.
Yeah.
And I experimented with various materials and paints and everything. And I had these lying around my home, and then it became something completely different. But 2007 was like the
So that's when the actual mold is from? From 2007?
It's me like 20 years ago.
All right. That's interesting, man. So is that the kind of thought process? Because even like with your blog, Fisher is Dead, is that kind of like the same concept there? Just trying to imagine yourself?
My blog actually happened because Martin Eric Ain said when we reformed Celtic Frost, The internet was, of course, starting to really bloom.
Yeah.
And Martin Eric Ains said we should have an outlet where we can let people know the progress. Because we took our time with the reunion. We took 5.5 years to do this album.
Of course.
And Martin said we should have an outlet. And he suggested that I start a blog. And so a lot of the early entries in the blog are like the progress of the album, my thoughts about it, and some of Martin's words. So that's a completely different thing. And by now that the blog has been going for 21 years.
It has been, yes.
It's crazy.
Amazing stuff. Mr. Tom G. Warrior, such a pleasure to have you back on Iblis Manifestations.
Absolute honor to be back.
Yeah, honor's mine. Thank you. Let's just jump straight into it, man. I mean, that show last night, holy fuck. That's all I can say, really. I mean, there's so many things just so many thoughts that spawned from watching that show, hearing some of those songs, which I kind of want to go into with yourself, if you wouldn't mind. But more importantly than any of that, I mean, what are your own emotions and reflections from the night as we sat here now, less than 12 hours or so later?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not a concert like any other. When you, as a Swiss band, play London, that's not something that's guaranteed for a Swiss band to begin with. And so a concert in London was always something special for me, from the old days to today. And as I said yesterday on stage, it was almost exactly 39 years after Celtic Frost's first appearance in London. Which made it very significant to me, because at the time in 1986, I would have never thought that I'll still be doing music 4 decades later and still be welcomed here, which blows my mind, of course.
And perhaps more importantly, playing some of the same songs
exactly.
that you played here 39 years ago.
I have to really state this, because some lovable haters of mine always say, stick to Triptykon, are you so desperate to play Celtic Frost? And there's a lot of things to say about that, which I won't do now, but I'm just going to state the most obvious. I wrote these fucking songs, and these songs are my life. Almost every single Celtic Frost songs had a profound influence on my life, whether I liked it or not. And Martin too, of course.
Yeah.
And there's no way I'm going to spend the rest of my life without that music. I formed Triptykon specifically to continue Celtic Frost's path. And of course, Triptykon have continued as Celtic Frost would have. But Triptykon is basically Celtic Frost by a different name. I was going to be cheap and call it Celtic Frost without Martin, but okay. It is essentially, I'm operating exactly like Celtic Frost. So we've always played Celtic Frost music, because it's part of my life. And we also, of course, play Triptykon music because it was also part of my life. And the show yesterday being entirely Celtic Frost, all the shows where Triptykon play Celtic Frost only are by request of the festival, not by Tom being desperate or Tom wanting to cash in, which is another issue. When people say, yeah, he wants to cash in on his Celtic Frost. Well, if you go to work, you expect a salary.
Yeah.
Everybody. If you're a baker, yeah, you want to cash in on the bread you sell. Oh my fucking God.
Yeah.
You know,
good point. Yeah.
It's my profession. But
I don't think a justification is even necessary, as you...
I'm not justifying it. I'm simply stating the obvious, because there's some people who think...
Yeah.
I feel contempt for them. They think they have to tell me how to live my life. And I'm the last person to listen to that. But it doesn't hurt to occasionally address this.
Sure.
You know, if you're a loser and you're jealous about somebody else's work, maybe put that energy into your own. If I had been sitting at home in 82, 83, 84, and instead of writing demos together with Martin and recording demos and putting everything, every last cent we had, everything into musical fanaticism, if I had spent that time instead of writing evil mails to people, I would be nowhere. And that's the difference. Absolutely. If I put that energy into destructive things instead of creative things. I mean, you understand this, right?
I understand that fully, yeah. I think the thing is as well, you know, a lot of people, they just want to have a say in something, you know, and then they've not really achieved the status of the.
You know what it is?
Involved.
If you have nothing to say, you want to have a say in it.
Sure, yeah. I think that's very much it. Yeah,
it is.
I'd like to quickly interrupt this episode for the following message. My band Trivex will be releasing our third full-length album, The Great Satan, via the legendary Osmos Productions on the 30th of May, 2025. If you're into extreme metal that's unapologetically defiant, politically and religiously charged, and unafraid to make bold statements where other ways shy away, then you need to hear this album. I would say that musically, The Great Satan blends dark ritualistic Middle Eastern elements with traditional folk and very dynamic usage of the extreme metal subgenres, creating a unique and immersive soundscape. The intro track actually utilizes folk instruments, including baklama and oud, and throughout the album, you will also get the usage of 3 different languages. One, which is, of course, my native language of Farsi, or otherwise known as Persian. We also have songs that are sung in Arabic and, of course, English. The album embodies rebellion, violence, and ecstasy, unafraid to say what so many extreme metal bands will not. Copies will be available directly from the Trivex Bandcamp page, or otherwise from the official Osmos web store. Thank you for your support, and please enjoy the rest of the episode. Yeah, absolutely. And they see you, you know, like, another part of it is as well, you know, I think this is very important to put out there, is that, first of all, they're your songs, you're entitled to play them. More importantly, these voices are not the majority. The majority of people want to hear these songs live. So
it was so much fun yesterday.
Yeah.
Coming back to your original question, it was so much fun yesterday to connect with this fantastic audience over these songs, because these songs have a history not just for me but also for the people who were there. They were singing all the lyrics. They were headbanging to it. What's wrong with this?
Nothing.
You know, and I mean, if I'm totally honest, these are songs written like 40 years ago. Some of them, and I've changed, of course, in these decades. I'm not the same guy that I was as a 20-year-old, totally inexperienced Tom Warrior. I'm going to be 62 in a couple of months. I'm a very different person, of course. I've lived a life. I have life experience, hopefully, some maturity, hopefully. And of course, it changed me. So if I have a choice, of course, Triptykon is much closer to me, because Triptykon reflects the current Tom. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't preclude me loving these songs for a different reason, because these songs were like the stones in my path, the floor plates on that road that I'm walking, and as such they're hugely important. And especially with the death of Martin, there's some songs that we performed yesterday where I have like a film in my mind how Martin and I created these songs and how we produced them in the studio. And for example, playing for the very first time ever a Dying God yesterday on stage was first and foremost a tribute to Martin Ain, because I know how important this song was for Martin. And that's also why the video projections at that point focused on Martin.
It was quite emotional.
It's not about me, you know, I mean, Martin can no longer come on stage. And believe me, if he was still alive, we would have asked him to be a guest in these shows. But, you know, I basically also carry his memory now. I'm involuntarily put into this position. Because I was the older one, I always thought I'm going to die before him, and he's going to be the administrator of Celtic Frost's legacy. But now I'm in this position, and this is part of what happened yesterday on stage. And I know people totally understand this. There's a lot of fans of Martin Ain in the audience, and you can see it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I'm really glad this song came up. I wanted to talk to you about this. So, obviously, this song as an art piece of its own is extremely powerful, extremely potent. The lyrics, extremely just... It's, you know, the words don't do justice in describing the song. But one thing that I think is perhaps important to place in people's attentions, just to perhaps highlight the uniqueness of the performance yesterday, is the fact that now when it comes to vinyls or tapes or CDs, you can't count how many times a song's been listened to. But if you look at Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, all of that, you can measure that, right? Out of your entire 40 plus years of a career, A Dying God Coming into Human Flesh is the most listened to song of yours ever. And not only you never played this song live with Celtic Frost, okay, that would then mean that Martin also never got to play the song live either, which consequently would also mean that this was his most listened to song that he ever recorded. Absolutely. So how special is that to actually... Because I was speaking to Miles about this yesterday, as you're a great manager, fantastic guy. I was talking to him outside when we were outside the Black Card. And I said to him, oh yeah, we're going to play the song because you guys put like a guitar bit of it. And immediately I was like, oh, fuck, they're going to play this, you know. And I said to him, who's doing the vocals? And he said, Tom's doing it.
Well, here's the story. And by the way, I have to agree with you. Miles Hackett, our manager, is one of the best things that happened to me in my life, just as a side note.
I could see that. He's a great guy.
Here's the story. We were working on the Monotheist album for like five and a half years, as I said earlier. And we had 1 million song ideas, demos that some of them totally crazy. Some of them are still lingering in my archive and might see the light of the day one of these days. And Martin came with the song idea for A Dying God. He had written this song idea together with our guitar player at the time, and he invited me to contribute the second half to the song. So it became a collaboration, but it was the spark came from him, and there's still a demo, and I actually wanted to release it, but some of the ex-members of Celtic Frost made demands that are just ridiculous, so it hasn't seen a release yet. But there's a demo of Martin's first half of the song.
Wow, okay.
And we developed that song, and I could see that Martin put his entire heart into it. In the early days, I always encouraged Martin to write more music. There again, I wasn't this pretentious rock musician at the time. I actually felt it was a huge burden in the early days that I had to write everything. Martin only contributed the lyrics, and I always encouraged him, write more music, but he told me much later, many years later, that he didn't feel confident enough to do that. So when we came back together as adults and did Monotheist, he had gained much more self-confidence, and he brought a lot of music, some of which made it on the album, and A Dying God is a part of that, and I'm extremely glad about that because his music was super interesting. He never brought an ordinary song. You know, if he together rejected one of his songs, it wasn't because it was boring. You know?
Yeah.
And then we did the song, and Martin said, let's both sing it in the rehearsal room and see what it sounds like. So we did a version in rehearsal room where I'm doing the lead vocals, and we did a version where he did the lead vocals, and then we decided together. And since I was already the main singer on the album, I was quite intrigued by his vocals. He put so much emotion in it, as you can only do when you write the lyrics.
Yeah.
So I suggested we take his version, which is what ended up on the album. But your question, who's going to sing the song? People don't know, but I had sung this song already 20 years ago.
Of course.
In my version, which of course we had a similar concept. We worked out the concept together, but this was Martin's vocal, my vocal.
You did a great job, by the way.
Martin is no longer here. I took over basically his version and performed it as a crossover to do tribute to him, but also kind of make it my own.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
But it is a quite challenging song. You're totally exposed in this song. And if anything goes wrong, also for our guitar player who works with loops and everything in the song, to cover all the guitar lines that are on the recording, it's a very dangerous song. Can easily go wrong, and then you stand there like an idiot.
Yeah. I was watching. I get nervous about loop effects because I was watching him do the bit, and obviously, you know, Victor's an absolute V-Center. He's an absolute pro anyway. So, but yeah, when I saw he switched from the main lead to the, you know, those lead notes, I was like, oh. Yeah. But yeah, it sounded fantastic. But you are right. It's a challenging song, but also because of how slow it is as well. The groove must be difficult to kind of get into, I imagine.
You know, I'm not a trained musician. I have a very, very humble and modest background. Everything self-trained, more or less badly.
Yeah.
And the current Celtic Frost set, well, also the Triptykon music, there's so many voices in it, different kind of voices, that it's very challenging for me. I'm not a trained singer, as everybody can hear. And yeah, that's one of the songs that are very challenging because you're out there. There's only one guitar, and you're really out there. And if the slightest thing goes wrong and I can't hear myself or something, you know, it can get quite embarrassing. And actually, yesterday's show was unfortunately marred by a lot of technical problems that hopefully the people didn't really get too much of. And also already during the soundcheck, we had quite a fair share of technical problems in spite of our very professional crew, and also Victor had some problems with the switching. Oh, and we were like, Jesus Christ, if this happens tonight, it's going to be fairly embarrassing. But I think it went okay.
Was there a particular song? Was there a particular reason, rather, why you didn't play that song during the Celtic Frost?
You know what? I really don't know. I'm wondering myself.
Right.
Like I said, the song was hugely important for us, and then when it came to the time, Celtic Frost chose the video for the Monotheist album. I suggested we do A Dying God. Mm-hmm. I thought the song was very cool. I thought Martin's idea was fantastic, the idea behind the song, and so I didn't have any ego issues. I was like, Martin, let's take your song for the video. You know, we haven't been there for 16 years, and I wasn't going to put my face on a video. I was like, this song is good. Let's take your song. It's one of the most outstanding songs on the album. I don't give a shit how much I'm in the video. The song is fantastic. Let's take your song. So it was also the video. It was really important to all of us, and I have no idea why the hell we didn't perform it. I was thinking about it, and my Triptykon asked me about it. Why did you never perform it? And I couldn't really give an answer. Wow. If I speculate about my own decisions or our own decisions at the time, maybe it was because Celtic Frost hadn't been around for 16 years, and there was a whole new generation of metal fans, and we wanted to on the first tour, and we didn't know at the time that it would be the last, but on the first tour after reunion, I think maybe we wanted to bring back all the songs that they hadn't heard, you know, all the classics and everything, and maybe that was the reason why there wasn't so much Monotheist material in it. I really don't know. It puzzles me. Or maybe we weren't just good enough to do it live. And now 20 years later, I can actually attempt it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that simple. Maybe we're just amateurs.
Well, I'm certainly not amateurs. I don't think amateurs would.
Oh, there's a lot of amateur moments in Celtic Frost history, but which is okay. Like we said before the camera was on.
Yeah.
You take one step at a time and you learn as a musician, and of course some of the early stuff is hit and miss sometimes.
Yeah, but then it's the character for it as well, isn't it? But I think so. Yeah, I just want to emphasize on how special I think it is that, you know, playing that song, but also doing it in Martin's absence when he never got to play that song live. With it being, again, as I said, the most listened to song of all time isn't necessarily the most artistically prolific song either, but it was a special song. And as you said, the fact that so this actually makes it more special when I kind of reflect on what you're telling me there, based on the fact that he wasn't contributing as much earlier on, but then you come back and do Monotheist 20 years later, maybe, from like the original releases. The 20 years from, 21 years, in fact, from To Make Ethereum, if I'm not mistaken. So let's say if we put the two and two together, the fact that you then come back and then the music video of that album is actually mostly Martin. Mm-hmm. And like you said, in the song, first half him and then the second half himself. That's kind of fucking special, man.
Well, for me, the very special thing about that song was it's really Martin, and I mean I don't want to gain credit by mentioning Martin all the time, but Martin and I were basically like in a marriage, in an artistic marriage.
Well, you're a big part of each other's
but
lives.
I don't want I don't want to have a career on always mentioning Martin. But the fact of the matter is, we work together very, very closely. I mean, there was when you're in a band, there's months where you like see each other every day for I don't know how many hours, more than I saw my girlfriend at the time. What really was reality last night on stage was Martin was totally present when we performed this song, in my mind at least. And I really tried to do it justice. And I was thinking, if there's an afterlife, in which I don't believe, but I was like, if there's an afterlife, I hope he's happy with the way I'm doing. That was really what was going, honestly, what was going through my mind when I was standing there. And about the song in general, we had a lot of, how do you say, respect for that song. We knew it's not an easy song to perform. And it's, like I said, it exposes you. The slightest flaw can be heard. But then it turned out, actually, instead of all the anticipation of all sorts, it turned out that I enjoyed the song most on stage. And last night we decided we're going to play it in every set from now on, even in the Triptykon sets.
Amazing.
Because we enjoyed it so much. And it's so different. It really... Yeah. It gives the set some air. The rest of the set's so dark and heavy, and this song really gives it a break and gives it air, and it's a completely different vibe.
I think people will be very happy to hear that.
And I mean, after all, also monotheist is the root of anything Triptykon does. Triptykon is not a continuation of Morbid Tales. Triptykon is a continuation of monotheist. So it is actually much closer to who we are now.
Yeah. I see that. That's fantastic. Another song you played last night, which you finished the set with, Synagogue Satana. Mm-hmm. That, I mean, first of all, by the way, just before I get into the song, I really want to give credit to the fine, fantastic musicians you have in Triptykon as well, who absolutely never, ever miss a beat. But, fuck. That was special, because that was a song that I never heard that, because I didn't move out of Iran until 2011, okay? So never got to hear that song live. So
well, we've played it various times in Triptykon because we all love this song.
Of course.
And there again, that's one of the songs that really is a precursor of Triptykon, even though it's a Celtic Frost song. And yet again, it's a song that Martin and I collaborated on. I had a whole bunch of riffs and just couldn't get the arrangement. So Martin said, give me all the riffs, let me try. And I gave him, at that time, a tape of all the riffs for that song. Mm-hmm. And then a few days later, I came to the rehearsal room, and Martin was there and said, listen to this, what do you think of this? And he had arranged my riffs into the song, so it's really a collaboration. Yeah. Martin alone wouldn't have written like that, and I wouldn't have written it like that. Right. It's really a collaboration. And I think it's one of the most important songs for me personally of Celtic Frost. Mm-hmm. And it's even though it's a long song with a lot of changes, I absolutely love playing it.
Yeah. How do you feel going through the prayer bit? Because I know he used to do that back in the reunion shows.
That's a very, very good question, because the prayer, Martin was raised as a Catholic and suffered in his youth massively, and of course it's not the same as it is in your home country, but you know how it is when somebody is a religious extremist.
I know that too well.
His mother and his father were both heavily engaged in the local Catholic church, and his mother was an extremely dominating person. I knew her, and she really suppressed the family with her Catholic extremity. And Martin was deeply shaped by all these experiences. He rebelled from a very young age against this whole thing, and yet at the whole same time he was bombarded with Catholic religious things every single day. So when he wrote this prayer, I knew this was a very personal thing, and it was Martin basically sticking it to his mother. So when we first started performing this song, we did this already from the very beginning of Triptykon. I never did the prayer. I was like, this is Martin's thing, and I cannot do it justice. And after many years, we said maybe let's try it, because it feels very empty without the prayer there. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing it, but even though I'm doing it, I always want to am I doing it justice? Martin really wrote this for himself with feelings of himself, and it's a thing that's quite. I have a divided opinion about that. Should I do it? Should I not do it? But the song is just not complete without the prayer, so I'm doing it. Okay. But I'm very aware that it is probably the most flawed portion of the song, because this was really Martin's part. And if you see some of the recordings, the few videos that there are of the last Celtic Frost tour, when he performed the prayer on stage, it was like he prayed himself into a rage.
Yeah,
and it was real. It wasn't like him pretending to be evil. He was like really.
It was genuine.
His whole life was passing, and he also often introduced some songs with stories about his mother.
Right.
As a matter of fact, morbidly, his mother died around the time we toured, and he would always talk about the funeral of his mother and so on stage to the audience. So this was really a deeply personal thing, and I still don't know if it's right that I'm doing this prayer. I'm doing it to complete the song, but it's really Martin's part. What can I say?
Hey, just a quick moment of your time. For the past 3 years, Iblis Manifestations has been entirely self-funded. This means that every subscription fee, every piece of equipment, all of the travel expenses have come out of my own pocket. Over time, people have asked me how they can support the podcast, and to be honest with you, up until now, the answer's been pretty straightforward, and that is simply spread the word. But now, there's another way. I have set up a Patreon account where followers of the podcast will be able to make monthly donations to the podcast, and this will help cover the costs of streaming gear and basically everything else that goes into making this show. This isn't about making a profit, and to be completely honest, it's not about breaking even either, because that's certainly not been the case for the last 3 years. However, if you do find value in the conversations that we're having on this podcast and wish to help them forward, then you can now support the show. Just head to the link in description and hit the Patreon button. And, of course, it goes without saying, thank you for supporting Iblis Manifestations. It is much appreciated.
Well, there was the moment in particular, because in the background that you had, so obviously you got the video projection of some of the images, which I believe Kathy's sister actually put together. Yes. It looked fantastic, but the timing landed perfectly, because as you're doing that prayer, the Monotheus cover came on the back.
Well, and I supplied her with a very detailed set list with notes that she knew exactly what happens when.
Understood.
Yeah, and she did a fantastic job.
That was the special moment as you're doing the prayer, and then that artwork from Monotheus shows up. There was a moment. There was like you could like grab a knife and cut through the air.
There was a lot of firsts yesterday. Yeah. Not just some of the songs we played and the entire video projection that we had never used before. But there was also some glimpses of the artwork of the next album, but I don't think people actually realized that.
It
was hidden in the projection, was some glimpses of the next Triptykon album.
Amazing. Let's talk about
There was a lot of levels of... Yeah.
Let's talk about that then. So the next Triptykon album, how close are we? How have things progressed with this album?
Well...
Because last time you were on, you confirmed that Giger actually did the artwork for this one, and it's been waiting on the shelf just to be put out, which is very exciting.
It's been waiting for Tom to wake up. Wake the fuck up and write an album. No, I'm always writing music. I'm always writing lyrics. I'm always making notes. I have tons of notes about the production of the next album. So it is happening, and we have played new music, and we'll continue to create new music this year, and we have every intention to do it this year. Mm-hmm. And we'll release 1 or 2 songs as soon as possible once we feel we have some songs that we can showcase without giving the entire album away.
Yeah.
But it's still a process, and I think I mentioned that in our last podcast. The way the world is going, on every level, I find it very difficult to just think creatively and act like everything's fine. And yeah, let's do some music. I think there's some very serious issues in the world right now, and it doesn't really help my creativity. And because for me to be creative, I need to have a sense of the future. It's a shitty word. It's actually a word I hate, but I need to have some sense of hope. I usually feel contempt for hope. Hope is like helplessness. You hope for something better, but you don't know. I'd rather know or not know. But in this case, you write music for something in the future. You want music to stand there and exist. But if there's a world in flames, a world with environmental problems, with humans killing each other and stuff, music is so irrelevant. There's serious problems in the world that should be addressed, and here we are, small musicians. That sometimes is a bit difficult for me to just naively write music. Oh, hey, wow, that riff rocks, when the world is like self-destructing due to the inability of humans to learn from their own history. Makes it a bit difficult sometimes. So that's why the progress has been very slow, and I also had some issues in my private life in the past few years that interfered. But it is happening, and there are plenty of songs, some of which will be rejected, some of which will still grow, and there's also some ideas that I have for further songs. Okay. So it is happening, but I have my own record company, and I'm not a young artist that has to do a new album every year to prove I can do it. Of course. So I've taken the liberty of taking my time. And of course, what people maybe forget sometimes, the last Triptykon album was the Requiem that came out in 2020. It's not that long ago. And the Requiem is basically half a studio album. It's not just a live album. There's a lot of studio work on it. And then I did the Triumph of Death live album, which was also quite an involved project. Yeah. And I also did an album with the abortive project Nearith that was never released. So I've been very active. I've recorded albums, not all of which unfortunately came out. So this is what it is.
Just going back to, can I ask you a question? And please I don't want you to view this as pushback, but it's just more perhaps perspective. So the idea that the world is, okay, the world is fucked, we're doing this, and, people are making mistakes all across the world, corporate greed, all of that, which I know we definitely share some mutual viewpoints on that. But what I will say is, also, when you were first starting, the coined term, only death is real. That was, from my understanding, a response to the state of the world at the time.
It was a direct response to what we here in the West experienced as the Cold War, where you literally had the feeling that either the Soviet Union or the United States would press the red button and launch missiles at any given time. And that's how Martin and I grew up, with this constant threat of superpowers launching a nuclear war. And it wasn't far-fetched, it was very real, and there was a lot of periods of high tension between the two governments, and you never knew, And I was drafted into the military in Switzerland around the time we did the Hellhammer demos, and I was like, I can't be in for 21 weeks in the military. I just got a record deal. Yeah. At that time, you had to cut your hair and this and that, and I was like, my live stream is becoming reality, and now they want to draft me. So I did some things to get away from the military, but I had to serve civil protection. To make up for it. And civil protection was they trained me. I don't know if I told you this in the last podcast.
I don't think you mentioned that. No.
They trained me to be a bunker commander. All right. And I was commanding a nuclear fallout shelter. That was my duty and which was completely ludicrous. They told me, in this bunker that was like relatively small, there's going to be hundreds of people in there for months until the radiation is gone, and the toilets are like buckets. And if electricity fails, the air filter and the air pump needs to be done. With 24 hours, somebody has to turn, and there's dried food stacked there. So it was completely unrealistic. Yeah. But that's, it wasn't just something you saw on TV. It was absolute reality. I was actually trained for nuclear war to lead a fucking nuclear bunker. And that's the world we grew up with as children and teenagers. And of course, yeah, only death is real, and songs like that people think are like about Satanism. Messiah, for example,
Yes.
is all about Cold War and nuclear threat. There's many songs in the early days of Hellhammer and Celtic Frost that are about that. Martin and I basically expressing our frustration and fear and pain. So yeah, this is where it all comes from.
So can I ask you then, what's the difference between that and now, if that is the case?
Well, the difference is that we always thought maybe people will learn eventually. And you said, yeah, there's a lot of mistakes on the planet. The thing is, these are intentional mistakes.
Of course, yeah. No question about that.
Everybody makes a mistake. I'm the first one to know that. Yeah, I'm Mr. Mistake. But intentional mistakes, that's a whole different dimension.
Yeah.
Mistakes out of greed, mistakes out of religious extremism, mistakes out of ignorance, willful ignorance, and so on. That's a whole different dimension. And that's the problem. And absurdly, now it turns out that the Cold War was actually a period of stability. It was just two superpowers with nuclear weapons, basically. Some others had some too, but there was two superpowers keeping each other in check. And absurdly, now it turns out, well, the world was very stable at the time. Now, conflicts and dangers flare up everywhere, and we also fucked up the environment to the point where the planet is going lopsided. Now it seems like, well, those were the happy old days, because we knew what we knew what was happening. Nowadays, everything's unpredictable and explosive, and people refuse to learn. People refuse to acknowledge that war is not the solution.
Well, it's certainly not the solution. It's profitable, but it's not the solution.
Greed is not the solution. Egotism is not the solution. Division is not the solution. There's more and more people on this planet, and what do? We divide. When everybody intellectually knows that if you don't think about your own interests, the only way we can coexist is by coexisting, not by dividing.
Yeah. Well,
but there you go. I mean, who am I?
Yeah. But I think the point I was trying to make by that, I of course agree with you. I mean, as someone who deals with maybe more health-related side of things, you see the numbers all the time. Microplastics and seed oils and fluoride, and how all of these things are completely fucking people up. Factory farming, we could probably spend a whole couple of episodes just talking about that. Microplastics.
As you and I talk here, we both have microplastics in our brains.
All over.
It's insane, isn't it?
It is. But we have all of those things, so I see the numbers, and they're terrifying. Okay, we've definitely done some serious damage, not to just the environment, but ourselves. Absolutely. as a result of a lot of it, corporate greed, but also it's why I said to you last time, what's the best business model? Create a problem and then sell a solution to it.
Exactly. Solution. Yeah.
Solution, yeah. You can talk about cancer treatments and a lot, and how that can actually be prevented, and the fact that it's a metabolic disease actually, so it's more diet related, there's all kinds of different things around us. I say it's diet related, of course, then there's all the EMFs and all the bullshit out there as well. But there's also this element that I've keep finding myself coming into, that I think that the world has always been ending. I don't know if you ever saw those.
Yeah, but that's a feeble excuse, isn't it?
Not an excuse, but
we call ourselves the crown of creation, and we've been given a very functional brain. So that's, the world was always ending, in a way. Yeah. But we know exactly what it would take to make a harmonic world. I mean, it's not that difficult. I sound like a hippie from 1969, but
those hippies were onto something.
Ever heard of the word love?
Yeah.
It's very simple.
Well, those hippies were onto something. That's why the CIA used Charles Manson to overthrow the movement.
And just because somebody has a different skin color or whatever, a different, And then of course we were so smart, we introduced something called religion to divide us even further, which is basically, religion is just a covert word for politics, for greed, for power grab, and we see the results everywhere.
Yeah, of course. Well, this is very true. It's a method of control at the end of the day.
It's a politics of ancient times, And it's ludicrous that it still exists.
Yeah. I think that, and there's one of them in particular that I have quite a few problems with, as I'm sure you're aware. But the thing that I was trying to get to is that I don't know if you ever saw those sort of the scriptures from ancient Greece, where they were saying that this is ancient Greece, okay, it's a different world to where we even live in right now, where they were saying that, the world is ending. All of these young people no longer respect their elders, and they no longer follow the ways. The system is falling apart. This is ancient Greece we're talking about. This is fucking years ago from where we are right now. And
I know, but
throughout the years, there's also, I'm just making examples of, like, for example.
I know, but that's. I understand what you're saying, and of course that's very valid. But that's still a different sentiment, because the things that I was addressing before is not the young people. Of course, every generation is.
We've had the plague,
seems ludicrous to the older generation, but the problem right now is not the young people. The problem is the old white men. Maybe somebody should write a scripture about the old white men that control the capital.
Well, yeah, we can definitely talk about the deep state, and if we want to go into that realm, there's definitely an intentional sabotage of the human species and our world.
Without wanting to go into specifics, because I'm the last person to have any right to tell anybody. Sure. I never accept when people tell me what to do either. But the people who cry loudest about the deep state are actually voting for the deep state, and the people who cry about draining swamps and everything are basically electing the swamp. But that's just an observation from an idiot Swiss guy.
Well, I think the whole left and right thing is a setup just to control people. Anyway, vote blue, vote red. I think those institutions are ultimately corrupt and saved and
left and right. I mean, I hate this shit.
Yeah.
It's exactly like you say. It's a setup to create division. What happened to informed decisions? What happened to compassion? What happened to understanding? What happened to tolerance? What happened to educating yourself about other things that you don't know, things that seem alien to you? What happened about educating yourself about it to try to understand it at least? At least try. What happened to all these things? What happened to compassion and love? Fuck left and right. We know exactly what it takes. It's just, I don't run after a fucking party. I try to be able to look into the mirror in the evening and say, okay, you at least try to do your best. And I'm not trying to position myself as this holy person. As I said earlier, I make a lot of mistakes, but I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to improve. My house is crammed full of books. I'm trying to learn about history, humans, psychology, whatever there is in my little brain, what I can understand. What happened to this? We need to do that. That there's no way that the planet has a certain size. There's no escape from it. We need to do that in order to coexist, and to kill each other is not really the solution. Well, it is the solution if you don't give a shit.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think that's beautifully put. By the way, I share that sentiment wholeheartedly with every fiber of my being. What I will probably add to that is that there is still hope. Because the world, is the nature of the world and the matrix that we live in. It's the constant cycle of life and death. Where there's life, then there needs to be death. Because of the nature of how we have constructed our world and the way that we live, we're very greedy. We take a lot and we don't necessarily give a lot back. One of the most tragic things is the fact that we've also deprived the earth of our dead with the way that we bury them. That's one way that we're also fucking with nature, by putting them in little concrete holes or cremating them. By the way, when you get an urn, that's not really the person in there. There's like 5% of that person's there. The rest of it is just some bullshit. But we've done all of these things, which I think is totally wrong. And the way back is to realign with nature. But with that in mind, I think there is still hope. And it's just a case of living through it.
Well, yeah, there's hope maybe for the cockroaches. Once we annihilate ourselves, I guess, given the state of the planet, cockroaches are probably the most survivable species, and they're going to rule the next period on this planet. So yeah, there is hope for the insects. I agree with you. I don't think there's much hope for humans. After 15,000 years of more or less civilization, as we call it, I don't see anything civilized, but that's the word for it. Mm-hmm. After 15,000 years of wars and killing each other, lying to each other, and annihilating each other's countries, no, I don't see much hope for human beings. If you haven't learned this in 15,000 years, and now we have more information than ever before, and what do? We use it to divide each other. Wow. So yeah, there's massive hope for a very resistant insect species. And all power to them. I think they're going to handle the planet much better. I know it's very cynical, and my haters will love new material, but here I am.
Yeah. Well, I think the nuclear thing is it's terrifying to look at, but I actually think we might even have bigger threats than that.
Of course, the nuclear thing is just. Unfortunately, that's what I meant earlier. When the Cold War was relatively stable, there was the nuclear threat.
Sure, you knew what you were dealing with.
Now the nuclear threat is one of numerous threats.
Yeah, that's it.
And so where do you find the hope?
Where do I find the hope?
Yeah.
Well, in life. You said it yourself. The hippie movement, love. That's
movement.
Where the hope is. I know it. Listen,
I know
it sounds wishy-washy.
The hippie movement is long gone, unfortunately.
Thanks to the CIA. Yes,
it was ludicrous, of course, in parts, and they were very naive and rock fueled and this and that. But my childhood was while the hippie movement still existed, and my parents were walking around naked and saying peace and stuff, and they didn't want war. If everybody would have thought like them, we would all live in peace. Yeah, it would be maybe ridiculous with the flowery clothes, but at least we wouldn't fucking kill each other.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's very true. That's very true. Well, perhaps we can look into the past and maybe learn a few lessons. Maybe not everyone's going to learn, but I think some of us still can.
Well, here, as I said, these are valid topics to discuss, and we are human beings. We live in this world. We have every right to discuss it. It's our world. We live in it.
100%.
But who are we? I mean, there's also a limit to my intelligence, and we're just discussing this. But I'm not.
To all of ours.
Yeah. I don't claim to have the solution. Unlike many politicians, I don't claim I have the solution. I observe helplessly, and I try to work my thoughts about it into my lyrics, which is kind of my outlet, my hobby, psychology. That's as far as I can go, unfortunately. If I was the dictator of the world tomorrow, there would be peace, and that would be it. But I'm not. I would be the peace dictator.
Yeah. Well, one thing I can say for sure, Tom, if people who are listening, if more people were to take a page out of your book and what you just placed there, I think we might actually be onto something.
Contrary to some people think I'm not pretentious, and as I said, I have a very humble view of myself, with some exceptions. For the viewers, I'm looking at my girlfriend, who knows these exceptions. I have a very humble view of myself, and I know my limits very, very well. And as I said, I don't have the solution for everything. I don't know. We all create problems, and the internet and certain tendencies have increased these problems immeasurably in the last 20 years.
Sure.
And with 62, I at least have some right to have an opinion on it, because I saw more than half a century of this world passing by. When I was a child, the Vietnam War was on TV every single day, like people shredded to bits, people burned by napalm. This was a constant thing when I was a child. That's how I grew up. And then the Cold War and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe at least I have a right to comment on some of the observations I made. But I don't want to go any further. I mean, as I said, unlike many politicians, I don't claim I have the solution. But I'm very aware of the problems.
So the lesson is to just stay curious, regardless.
Well, you know, the thing is, it's also pretentious as a musician to talk about all of this. There's going to be people say, stick to the music.
Well, Blabbermouth did an actually article from our last podcast, which was specifically when we were saying that, which I think is valid. You know, I think you're still a citizen of the world, and you're...
Well, the thing is, if my gardener and the housewife next door can discuss politics, why can't we? Just because I'm a musician, you're a musician, we can't have an opinion of, you know, everybody has an opinion, and our job is a household job like everybody else's.
For sure.
But I also know my limits. Sometimes.
Mr. Tom G. Warrior, sir, never change. It was such a pleasure.
There's a lot of people who disagree with you.
I appreciate
I can
that.
say the
Thank
same
you.
about you. I want to say that on air. You know how much I respect you and your courage. Never change either.
I appreciate you, sir. Thank you very much. Real fucking pleasure to speak to you.
Same.
on
Let's
here
do this
again.
every day.
Yeah, right? If we did, we might have just actually figured out all the problems
We're
in the
going to have
world.
like a political podcast.
Let's do it. Thank you, sir. And to everyone listening, hope you enjoyed this one. Support Triptykon, and we'll see you in the next episode.